to communicate a very important issue. In Ireland at the moment, democracy is under attack, and it has been under attack for decades. Somebody legislated that the president doesn't have to check the constitutionality of a bill before he enacts it. That's the equivalent of telling people to commit a crime. That's the same as inciting crime, because effectively, in uncertainty, you're now telling people to presume constitutional what you haven't bothered to check for its constitutionality. That's a big problem. Constitutional means lawful. If you're telling people to presume something lawful, that's a fundamental error. Like, who would try to play a game of football without knowing the rules? Like, telling somebody to presume something is the rule without certainty means that it's an impossibility to knowingly play the game properly. If you're asking somebody to obey something as a law that you haven't bothered to check is lawful, then you're essentially inciting crime. Because as a governing body or as a member of government or an organ of state, it is your sole function to uphold the Constitution. That's your primary function, because your primary function is to maintain the rights of the citizen and to implement them, to practice them, and to even educate this citizen as to what they are. So if those functions aren't taking place within the society, the government are actually failing. But they're not failing by mistake. They're orchestrating that failure. They're orchestrating that collapse. Because when the legislator says, President, as it happens to be at the moment, President Michael D. Higgins, you can legislate whatever you want, and you don't have to employ the Supreme Court to check whether what you're enacting is constitutional or not. That is a very serious crime. Whoever legislated that committed treason. It wasn't democratically arrived at. It's a contortion. So, because what they're now saying is not a corollary of the Constitution, nowhere in the Constitution does it say, let's guess what's constitutional and let's presume what's constitutional. No, that would totally negate and refute the necessity for a constitution. The reason we have a constitution is so that we can have certainty about what our laws are and how our government are going to conduct themselves. If the government are now saying, just presume whatever we write is constitutional, how can you have any certainty that your government are obeying the law of the land decided upon by the people? So now what you're seeing is a tyrannical dictatorship. It's tyrannical because it's inciting crime. Now, if ignorance is no excuse for me, if I commit a crime, ignorance is no excuse for the government either. So if they're telling people to presume constitutional something that they haven't checked, now they're putting themselves and the public in harm's way, because they may or may not be telling the public to break the law because they haven't bothered to check, because somebody legislated that they don't have to check. Now that's highly suspect behaviour. Why, when the President of Ireland has access to the Supreme Court, he has them at his disposal, he can employ them call them together at any stage to check the constitutionality of any bill that has been presented before him for consideration as to whether it will be entered into the legislature or not. So it's being considered, it's on his desk for consideration, and at that stage it would be most pertinent and most logical for him to check the constitutionality of the bill while it's on his desk for consideration as legislature. Now, why would anybody ever legislate and tell the President of Ireland that he doesn't have to check the lawfulness of things he's going to ask Irish people to do? That's absolutely unacceptable, and it's actually treasonous because it goes against our democratic processes. So when they say that we're just going to legislate something that has the potential to completely negate your constitution, your country is under attack. Your government has been infiltrated by people who don't care about your constitution, probably Freemasons, which I heard from a Freemason. Michael D. Higgins is a Freemason. So we know that Freemasons favour their secret society over the Constitution, over the Constitution of Ireland. They hold the Constitution of Freemasonry. Because Freemasonry is a secret society, it naturally excludes its members from actually becoming members of the organs of state. Namely, in the Constitution it says that a member of An Garda Síochána cannot be a member of a secret society at the same time. So that members of Freemasonry would be excluded naturally from becoming a member of An Garda Síochána. But I happen to know that many members of An Garda Síochána are Freemasons, because I met them when I became a Freemason before I knew that it was actually the synagogue of Satan. So these witches and wizards of Freemasonry are entering into our positions in government, and now we can see that they're fighting against our constitution by legislating things and avoiding the democratic processes by which we're supposed to legislate for things. So it's one thing saying to the President, you can consider things for enactment. It's another thing saying to him, you don't have to consider the Constitution while you're doing so. You're effectively telling the President that he can set up his own country, even if it is contrary to the Constitution, which is effectively telling him he can tell the citizens to break the law. But the citizens didn't agree with this. Whoever legislated that we must presume something constitutional that hasn't been checked by our government is committing treason, and has. Because it's not acceptable, logical or reasonable or ethical or lawful to basically incite crime by telling your citizens to obey something that hasn't been confirmed as a corollary of the Constitution. In other words, hasn't been proved that it conforms to our Constitution or submits to our laws. And now they're trying to ask people to do things that are unconstitutional and unlawful, which it has been shown in the Criminal Justice Act 2006 under Section 115 and 117. They're now telling guards they can prosecute in court and represent each other's evidence and get involved in civil matters, all of which are a corruption of the administrative procedures of the court under our Constitution. So we have evidence that things are manifesting in the legislature which are against the Constitution, by way of the President not having to bother his Barney in testing the constitutionality of bills that are placed on his desk, probably placed on his desk by Freemasons, favouring the Constitution of Freemasonry instead of the Constitution of Ireland. Blessings in Jesus' name. We need to remove from our government Freemasons, because they're going against our Constitution, even joining a position of office. Blessings in Jesus' name. Now, just to add, this, I'm in no way a seditious entity. I don't want to overthrow our government. I want our government to submit to our constitution. It's the current government that are trying to overthrow our constitution. Blessings in Jesus' name. Holy kiss.